Welcome to IVF This, episode 194, IVF and Detachment.
Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go.
Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to IVF This 2026. I guess this is the second podcast episode to drop in 2026, but this is the first one I'm recording in 2026, so we'll count that. I hope you are all doing so well. I hope your holiday season was wonderful. All of the things. We're going to talk about something today that I think is pretty widely misunderstood, particularly in the world of IVF, and that is the art of detachment. You've probably heard it before in various ways, right? Try to detach. You can't care so much. You have to just let go. Just relax is another, albeit much more annoying way to detachment. But if you're in the middle of stim injections or refreshing your portal, waiting for updates, holding your breath during the 2-week wait, you might be thinking, when I say detachment, you might be thinking, Emily, detach from what exactly? From the thing I want more than anything? From the thing that my life is currently organized around? So let me start here. Detachment in IVF and detachment in general does not mean that you stop caring about something. It does not mean that you stop hoping. And it absolutely does not mean that you become like a calm, neutral, or unaffected by something that matters this deeply. Detachment is not about loving or wanting less. It is about loving and wanting yourself more, no matter what happens. Okay, and I know it sounds, I know it can sound a little ethereal, a little woo-woo, but I guarantee you, if you practice the art of detachment, the normal emotional upheaval that you do experience in IVF is so different. And again, you can, just like with everything in the podcast that I offer, you can use this outside of the context of IVF. Obviously, that's the context with which I'm talking about it. But the art of detachment is one of the, I would say, the practice of detachment that I've been practicing for the past few years has really changed my experience of just about everything. From IVF to parenting, relationships, even honestly, even my relationship with my work has changed tremendously and improved tremendously. So that is my hope for you guys. So this is really the heart of today's episode. So I want you to understand what detachment actually is. I'm going to give you some practical steps for how to do detachment or how to detach. But I want you to stay with me. If your mental blocks go up because you're hearing me say detach and what you're thinking I'm talking about is to stop caring, press pause on that. Don't press pause on the podcast. Press pause on that thought and let me make my case, okay? So detachment is not, and when we're talking about detachment, we're talking about like the art of detachment. This is a mindfulness technique. Eastern Philosophy, it's been around for literally the beginning of time, in like recorded history. It's very prominent in more Eastern culture, Eastern religion. But when I say detachment, I am referring to the art of detachment. Okay, so that's what I want you to think about whenever I say detachment. Detachment in and of itself is not emotional distance. It is a relationship shift. It's the practice of loosening your grip between the outcome and your worth the outcome and your identity, and the outcome and your belief about whatever you did if it was enough. Okay? Within the art of detachment, you still care, you still want the thing, and you still show up. Okay? But what's different is that you're no longer asking the outcome to answer questions like, am I enough? Is my body broken? Did I fail? Detachment is allowing uncertainty without turning yourself into collateral damage. You might say, I can want this deeply, and my life still gets to matter, even if it doesn't happen the way I had hoped. Another way to think about it is this outcome is important to me, but it is not the measure of me. It is not the measure of my worth. Now we know a little bit more of what detachment is. Let me tell you what detachment is not. Because many of you were taught the version of detachment that felt cold or shaming or impossible. And this part matters, okay? Detachment is not pretending you don't care, numbing out, emotional shutdown, forcing yourself to be positive or weaponized positivity, weaponized gratitude, assuming the worst so it hurts less, which doesn't actually work, but that's for a different podcast for a different day. It is also not controlling your thoughts so perfectly that nothing touches you. If detachment has ever been framed as just don't get your hopes up, I want you to hear this clearly. That is not detachment. That is not detachment. That is self-abandonment. Detachment does not remove grief. It does not make loss less painful or painless. What it does is it changes how alone you feel inside of your grief. So that might sound like this hurts because it matters, not because I did something wrong, right? This hurts and I did something wrong. It's very isolating. Whether you kind of consciously can understand how isolating that can be, both emotionally, it can even cause you to physically isolate because that's a really painful and overwhelming thought to carry with you all the time. But this hurts because it matters and not because I did anything wrong. That still allows you to feel maybe, oh, you're still hurting. You're still hurting. You're still going to grieve. It's still going to be painful. This hurts because it matters, not because I did something wrong, allows you to still remain open and in some cases curious, even in the midst of grief, even in the midst of pain. Now, it's all well and good, but let's be honest, and as someone who's been practicing the art of detachment for several years now, it's pretty difficult. I'm what I would consider to be a control freak in recovery. Not perfect. I still have those tendencies, but the art of detachment has helped loosen a lot of that. But and I'll talk about the practice of detachment in just a minute. But I want you to know, you're having to revamp a lot of how you think about yourself, how you think about the world around you, and how you think about your direct impact with the outcome of what you want or don't want. It's not easy, okay? And in IVF, where the emotional stakes are so high, it can be really challenging, right? Because IVF in and of itself is not a neutral experience, right? It is emotionally provocative, an emotionally evocative experience. IVF trains hypervigilance. If you weren't hypervigilant before you went into IVF, oh man, you will be hypervigilant during that process and even afterwards. It trains control. It seeks control. It teaches you to monitor, measure, track, optimize. Your body becomes the center of a group project. Your calendar revolves around numbers. Your worth can start to feel, or maybe not even start, maybe it's always felt like this, but your worth can start to feel tied to follicles, embryo, grades, betas, all of it, right? IVF quietly teaches if I just pay enough attention, I can control this. And when control slips, your nervous system panics, absolutely panics. And so, because for so many people, caring deeply has become a survival strategy in a lot of ways, right? IVF doesn't just ask you to hope, it asks you to micromanage hope. And then it tells you to detach. Well, no wonder it's so damn hard, right? So detachment during, let's say, stims. Detachment during stims does not mean being casual or disengaged. It means doing what's yours to do without asking today to guarantee tomorrow. So detachment during stims can look like following the protocol without interpreting every sensation as a sign, good or bad, letting your clinic hold the data instead of trying to carry it alone. And there's that's a kind of a fine line because you do want to advocate for yourself in your situation. But it's not, you don't have to hold all of that by yourself. Your clinic also carries a level of responsibility. Noticing, it also does mean noticing obsessive thoughts without letting them run the show, because you will have the thoughts, right? Just want to make that clear. My overthinking or my catastrophizing, that hasn't just gone away overnight. I still experience it. Anyway, it also can look like allowing your life to continue alongside IVF. And that's a really important thing to understand, because so many of the women that I talk to who are either considering or seeking or in the midst of IVF, and 1 cycle, 6 cycles, no matter, we tend to think that our life has to revolve around IVF for it to be successful. It has to be our sole focus. And some of that is tied to the urgency that we feel, because we think we'll feel better once we get through this. I have an upcoming podcast episode that talks about kind of our the toxic relationship that we can have with IVF, where we never rest. We just keep going and going and going. But again, that's another podcast for a different day. But your life, living well, living thoroughly, experiencing things, can live alongside IVF. A lot of times we just don't let it, right? And that's a big part of detachment, is that you are more present in your life and in your body. So you might say something like, today I am doing what today requires of me. Tomorrow gets to be tomorrow, right? Maybe you have an upcoming meeting with your boss. Maybe you have, maybe you're going to visit your in-laws or something like that, right? And that can be tomorrow's problem, right? I'm going to do what I can do today, and then I will be present, ready, and available for whatever tomorrow brings. Another anchor or coping statement can be, my job is participation, not prediction. Participation, not prediction. We think we're really good at prediction, and a lot of times we are. But most of the time when we try to predict things, we suffer ahead of time, when we're not, we don't know for sure that that's what's going to happen. Or another option, another coping statement could be, I can care deeply about this, about something, about whatever that is, without monitoring every possible variable. I have 4 more coping statements. I'm allowed to want this without the knowledge of how it ends. Right now, I can come back to my body instead of trying to race ahead. Nothing I am feeling today is a verdict in any way. This cycle does not get to define me. So that was detachment during stim cycles. What about transfer cycles? Everybody knows the stim cycle, that's the grunt labor of IVF. You got to get the follicles, you got to get the eggs, you got to get the embryos, right? Transfer cycles are different. Transfer cycles can be, I'm not saying that stim cycles aren't emotional, but transfer cycles can be a little bit more of an emotionally laborious experience versus the physically laborious experience of stim cycles. They both have overlap. I'm not saying one is more than the other, but we tend to have a lot more emotional load with transfer cycles and a lot more physical load with stim cycles. So for transfer cycles, because they carry such an enormous weight, this is the time to practice a little bit more of the detachment. Transfer cycles are symbolic. They hold history, hope, grief, and longing all at the same time. Detachment does not mean dampening your hope, skimming your hope, obfuscating your hope. It doesn't mean anything like that. It means refusing to make the outcome a referendum on your body, your effort, your deservedness, or your future. Detachment during a transfer cycle might look like, I can hope fully without making hope responsible for protecting me. Now, that's one of my favorite lines, so I'm going to say that one more time. I can hope fully without making hope responsible for protecting me. So that may be one of my most favorite lines that I've ever written in 5 years of doing IVF this. Another one could be, I can imagine a future without punishing myself if it does not happen, if it does not arrive. This transfer matters, and I matter regardless of the outcome. I still matter, and this cycle matters, right? They both can matter, but my self-worth, my deservedness does not hinge on this being successful. I can be here with this feeling without trying to solve it. Hope is allowed here without conditions. A lot of us make hope conditional, and that's not what we're talking about. Hope does not have to be conditional. Hope can exist without conditions. No outcome gets to rewrite or write who I am as a person. It doesn't get to decide that. It does not have the power to decide that about me. Detachment is a practice, and grounding is how you do that. Okay, so detachment isn't a destination, it's a returning. Okay, when I say returning, I don't mean like thinking your way into calm, which sometimes can work, most of the time it doesn't. I mean grounding. Detachment lives in the body first, not the mind. Because when your nervous system is flooded, no amount of reframing will land. And I've talked about this in the podcast before. A lot of the cognitive work we do is absolutely useless if we are in the throes of grief, anger, jealousy, anything that we would consider to be a negative emotion. Cognitive work is completely useless in that way because nothing's going to penetrate when you are flooded with emotion. So in order to get to the cognitive part where we can think about what we want to think about, we have to become more grounded and back in our bodies so that we can get there, right? When I used to have a relationship with a therapist, a friendship, I don't know why I said relationship, a friendship with a therapist who she folded her thumb inside of her palm and then covered her other 4 fingers on top of it. And she would say, this is a model of the brain. And when you're emotionally flooded, you flip your lid. I should mention that this was a friend when we were working with children. That's why the description. But when you flip your lid, nothing can get through to you. When that switch flips in your brain where emotion and instinct have taken over, you have to get back into your body. You have to get grounded and you have to be centered. Not necessarily calm, although grounding is very calming. I don't want you to think about, I have to calm down. I have to calm down. No, you have to ground. Ground first, the calm will come, and then we can talk about, the way that we want to think about things. Grounding is a generic term. It really is any practice that helps you come back into the present moment, back into your body. When IVF pulls you into the future, into the past, into the spiral of what ifs, it's how you remind your system, I am here, I'm safe enough right now, presumably you are, and this moment is not the outcome, okay? So I've got a few examples of grounding. Some of these are my absolute favorites. Putting your feet on the floor and naming 5 things that you can see is a fantastic grounding exercise. Holding something cold or textured. I'm a little bit of a fidgeter, surprise, surprise. And so one of the things, a lot of the fidget toys that I have are very, very tactile. So there's a lot of texture that I can feel. And I prefer that. I won't even fidget them. I'll just rub my fingers over them for the texture, and that helps ground me. Slowing your breath and lengthening the exhale. One of the first things that changes in our body's stress response is a quickening and a shallowing of our breath. You got to think that in a moment where you're activated, your brain doesn't know the difference between physical threats or emotional threats. It interprets it all as there's someone behind me with a knife and they're going to kill me. Just had to be sure. So one of the fastest ways to ground yourself, to remind your body that you are not, in fact, in danger, is to intentionally slow your breathing. So you would want to inhale, let's say for a count of 5, but on the exhale, you're going to lengthen it. So if you were breathing in for a count of 5, maybe you'll breathe out for a count of 8 or even 10, so that you can lengthen the exhale, which signals to your body, hey, there's actually not a threat around us. We can start the work of relaxing and calming our body. Placing your hand on your chest, I do this a lot. When I'm talking or when I'm writing, when I'm thinking, and my thoughts want to just go wild, put your hand on your chest, and I will couple that with the lengthening exhale breathing. You can even do your belly or the tops of your legs, whatever is going to work best for you to ground you. I use all 4 of those grounding techniques in certain different ways. But honestly, if you go on Pinterest or Google search or ChatGPT grounding techniques, you're going to get a list of 60 that you can try and see what works best for you, right? These are just the ones that popped into my head that I use most often. They work for me. They might not work for you, but there's tons of options out there. Grounding also doesn't make you care less. What it does is help you care for yourself and for the situation from a grounded place instead of a flooded one, right? Not from an emotional standpoint where you feel like you are at the mercy of your emotions, but from a neutral, grounded, solid place. And that is where detachment actually lives, in that groundedness, in that calm. So before we go, I want to offer you a short grounding invitation. You can do this now or come back to it later. If it feels okay, I want you to place one hand on your body wherever feels supportive. Chest, stomach, tops of your legs, whatever. I want you to take a slow, intentional breath in, and then let your exhale be a little longer than your inhale. Notice something that you can see, something that you can feel, something that reminds you that you're here right now. You don't need certainty in this moment. You don't need answers, just presence. Now, if detachment feels hard or maybe it feels really abstract, it's not because you're weak or that you don't understand. It's because you are loving something that matters so, so deeply to you, okay? And you're allowed to care deeply. I want you to care deeply. Nobody can get you to stop caring deeply. Like, think about the money, the time, the physical, mental, and emotional labor that goes into this. I want you to care deeply, right? That never would you hear me say, you need to care less about this idea of bringing a child into this world, something that you've longed for and prayed for and now are, dumping thousands of dollars into. I would never say that. What I do say is that you are allowed to care deeply and you're allowed to protect yourself gently at the same time. Detachment isn't about loving this less. It's about loving yourself more, no matter how it unfolds. And that is not giving up. That is staying with yourself through one of the hardest things a human can endure. And that is worth protecting yourself for the person and for the future mother that you want to be, is showing up and protecting yourself through the process as well. And that is the beauty of the art of detachment. I'm so glad you joined me today. That is what I have for you. I hope you have a beautiful week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.